people of Iraq, who with our support are taking the fight to ISIL, must continue coming together to expel these terrorists from their communities. The people of Syria, whose story Jim Foley told, do not deserve to live under the shadow of a tyrant or terrorists. They have our support in their pursuit of a future rooted in dignity. From governments and peoples across the Middle East, there has to be a common effort to extract this cancer so that it does not spread. There has to be a clear rejection of these kind of nihilistic ideologies. One thing we can all agree on is that a group like ISIL has no place in the 21st century.
Leadership remains perhaps the most elusive of qualities, whether it's in the home, the workplace, and these days it would seem especially on the home front. Ken Kesey was a noted author, most recognized for the novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And when asked about leadership, he said, quote, "You don't lead by pointing and telling people some place to go. You lead by going to that place and making a case," unquote. Take that into consideration for the current level of leadership in America at so many levels, and there is indeed a reason to be concerned. Welcome to MidPoint, President of the American Defense Initiative, Pam Geller, and nationally syndicated op-ed columnist and political commentator, Tina Dupuy. Ladies, thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ed.
Pam, I'm going to begin with you on this because when we talk about leadership, there are those people who want to say that this is a corrupt leadership that we are currently in. Others say it simply is clueless. All right, corrupt or clueless, where do we start?
Well, I think the question really is clueless or complicit. Obama is woefully unprepared to face the threat of the Islamic State. He created that threat by leaving Iraq precipitously and giving an opportunity to this group. He has denied that it has anything to do with Islam, Islamic Jihad, despite its name, the Islamic State, and that the Foley killing has anything to do with the U.S. when we know that Foley was beaten more than the other hostages and actually hung on a wall because his brother was a U.S. soldier. This shows that he's encased in denial and willfully ignorant, and this is not a recipe for success or a sign that he's prepared to deal with this very grave threat.
Tina, there's a couple of words in there: clueless, complicit, denial, woefully inept. Which ones do you go with, if any?
Look, this was not created by Obama leaving Iraq. The argument can be made that we actually never did leave Iraq, but preemptively invading Iraq caused instability in the region, and that's why ISIL was able to rise to the level of power that it's at right now, and the level of influence. Also, I just like to, I just don't think that we need to paint all of Islam with a broad brush. I mean, we don't have Christians on cable news to make them apologize every time Westboro Baptist Church does something egregious.
Well, but you would say the Westboro Baptist Church, however, is just one group and a few people who are there. When we talk about Islam, we are talking about a global religion, and in many ways, people say it is globally a problem.
Well, Christianity is also a global religion, and there are fringe groups within Christianity who corrupt have some kind of weird interpretation of what they believe to be their religion. So, I mean,
they don't seek to kill people, though.
Actually, that's not true. I mean, there are Christian terrorist organizations. There are some really horrible people out there who use any kind of religion to justify doing horrible things.
So then, when we're talking about leadership here, give me your opinion on this. Are we overreacting simply? Is the president doing what he needs to do? Because when we talk about leadership, we go right back to the golf game after talking about James Foley. That in itself was pretty damning to a lot of people.
Well, I think in a lot of ways the president's hands are tied. We went into Iraq preemptively under false pretenses, and now that has destabilized the region in such a way that there really is not the political will to go back and have a full-scale land war in Iraq or Syria or these other places that really Syria fit the bill much more than Iraq did. There are actual videos of the people being gassed in weapons of mass destruction, and there's a lot more evidence that Syria was what we were told Iraq was in 2003. So I think a lot of what Obama is dealing with is the lack of political willpower to actually go in there again. I think that this is a president who turned out to be much more of a war hawk and anybody who voted for him could have possibly imagined. But foreign policy is not a black or white, overly simplistic, it's us and them, especially when we're talking about the Middle East, where everything's very incredibly complicated, and we have not only sectarian violence and sectarian wars that have been going on for millennia, but we also have we have nuclear weapons and also Israel in the mix. It's not a very simple place to have kind of destabilization, and apparently that wasn't thought about 11 years ago when we went in.
Pam, we're talking in, if you excuse me just 1 minute, Tina. Pam, let me throw it to you right now, because we're talking about the hands are tied issue here. And again, when that comes down to leadership, there are those, and a point is made, we simply are there and he is cleaning up a mess that is left behind. But do we need to then look at what the leadership is now instead of what it was 10 years ago?
Once again, we see the left's complete disconnect from reality. His hands are tied. He's tying his own hands. There's Christian violence. Nowhere is there are Christians slaughtering in the name of Christ, screaming Christ Akbar, or Jews Hashem Akbar. There have been 23 deadly Islamic attacks, not including thwarted, deadly Islamic attacks since 9/11, each one with the imprimatur of a Muslim cleric, each one citing Quran chapter and verse. I don't know what this woman is talking about, but there's absolutely no reality. There are
Pam, I know your name and you know my name. There's no need to be like that. If we want to have a conversation, let's have a conversation.
Hold on a sec, Tina. Tina, please. I'm going to give you a chance to respond, Tina, in 1 second. Pam, go ahead and finish.
Her ridiculous nonsense, blaming Bush 11 years later. Obama inherited a stable Iraq. He completely squandered it. He cut and run. The idea that this is complicated, you make it complicated. No one's saying all Muslims. You're saying all Muslims when you group them all together. Clearly, there are moderate Muslims that don't engage in jihad, but there is a problem in Islam. There is a problem in Nigeria. There's a problem in Central African Republic. There's a problem in Gaza. There's a problem in Lebanon. There's a problem in Syria. There's a problem across the Middle East and Northern Africa. And the idea that we keep denying it is the reason why we're in the fix we're in now. It's not complicated. There's an annihilationist ideology that must be defeated. You're uncomfortable with that. I'm uncomfortable with putting my entire country and the free world in jeopardy. It depends on what your priorities are. But her argument is a complete disconnect from reality.
Okay, let's go ahead and let her get there then, Pamela. I understand. Tina, now to you again. And of course, it comes down again to the question we're focusing on here is leadership then. In light of responding here to what Pamela said, are you satisfied then with the leadership that we are getting from the president?
I think that he is much more of a war hawk than liberals wanted him to be, and he's doing absolutely everything that he. Look, you had your chance. I didn't personally attack you, and I also didn't snicker when you talked, and I also know your name because they told me that before I got on the air.
What does that mean?
Okay, let's go ahead, ladies, please hold on. Pamela, please. Tina, go right ahead. Make your statement.
Here's the thing. Statistically, there have been substantially more Americans who've died of extreme weather than there have been Americans who've died in terrorist attacks. The American we have a D plus in our infrastructure. We have a much more likely chance of being in a bridge collapse than we have dying from a terrorist act in this country. Yes, terrorism is horrible, and those pictures of James Foley were absolutely egregious and disgusting, and it should be condemned, and it absolutely has been. However, when it comes to leadership, there are a lot of things that we need to, as a country, start talking about if the goal is to keep Americans safe.
Okay, 20 seconds then. What are those things we need to talk about,
not fall
Tina?
down around us is having our infrastructure not fall down around us and being able to prepare for the changing climate.
Okay, so you're focusing on infrastructure and climate then as the things that you believe need to have leadership at the moment.
Right. Absolutely, and that's what leadership does. It lets people, it sets a priority, and this is what we need to be focusing on now, because statistically, more Americans have died from extreme weather every year than have died from terrorist attacks. Okay,
Pamela, last 30, 40 seconds. I'm going to let you get the last word in here in response.
You can avoid reality. You cannot avoid the consequences of avoiding reality. This is the left talking about the weather when even Hegel said the threat has never been so grave. The beheading of Foley shows that the Islamic State meant it when they said that all Americans were legitimate targets. And Obama condemning it from the eighth hole just shows how lacking in leadership this country is, and how really dangerous it is now because he's the President of the United States.
Pam Geller and Tina Dupuy, spirited indeed, exactly what I would expect of both of you. Very intelligent and good comments as well. I thank you both for being here. Let's do it again real soon.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you very much. All right, later on this hour, if we made the guns a little smarter, might that have avoided events such as happened in Sandy Hook? Or is it more about smart people? And next up, flashback to another facet of the questions still waiting to be answered about Ferguson, Missouri. The Department of Justice is involved. Another autopsy, an autopsy that we still wait for. That and a lot more coming up right here on MidPoint, where every day we question everything.